Alright YouTube, it's come time now to release another video on the topic of Satanism, because there seem to be a lot of misconceptions floating around about Satanism in general, and I'd like to explain first of all that there are different paths within Satanism, and then a little bit about the actual beliefs. This is from a purely satanic perspective. I am myself a Satanist, as most of you know, but hopefully people looking up this video looking for information on Satanism or looking to debase Satanism like so many fundamentalists have been doing to my videos lately, hopefully they will get a little kernel of knowledge about the actual topic and learn not to be ignorant. Probably wishing too much, but let's make the video anyway. First off, there are three major types of Satanism. And this is something that most Christians don't understand. They think that Satanists go to an actual satanic church and hold black masses and variously sacrifice children or virgins, or, theistically worship the devil and dance around naked and have orgies. These things aren't the case. The fact is that there are three different major types of Satanism. They sort of interlap in some ways, but basically they are LaVeyan Satanism, independent Satanism, and theistic Satanism. Now you can sort of look at, for instance, a lot of Christians think Aleister Crowley was a Satanist. He wasn't a Satanist. He predates what you would term modern Satanism anyway. But he certainly was not a Satanist. He may have invoked various demonic powers and so forth in his invocations. That doesn't make him a Satanist. He was an occultist, particularly in his own path, Thelema. It has very little to do with what you would term Satanism. So explaining the three kinds of Satanism, LaVeyan Satanists are members of the Church of Satan, and or you could variously say the people within the Church of Satan, the hierarchy there would say only people who are members of the Church of Satan are legitimate Satanists. Outside of that, you have other LaVeyan Satanists who adhere to the Satanic Bible but aren't actually members of the Church of Satan. Now, one common misconception about the Church of Satan is that it's a physical location, a physical church, literally as Christians have churches where people go to in black robes to worship. That's not the case. There is no physical church of Satan. Satanism is generally a solitary or small group practice. There may be small groups of Satanists that get together once in a while to hold celebrations or, to perform a marriage or something along those lines. Those happen very sporadically. Satanism is such a closed-off religion because you've got to understand the history behind Satanism. LaVeyan Satanism, at least, was founded in the 1960s. Throughout the 70s, 80s, and most of the 90s, it fought to survive because it was being brutally suppressed by Christians. That is to say that the Christians were persecuting them heavily. There were death threats, there were bomb scares, there were attempted assassinations of Satanists, there was bullying. The satanic movement was essentially driven underground. Now, the LaVeyan Satanists have put their head in the sand, so to speak, and I have very little respect for the administration of the Church of Satan. I would say that most of them are out of touch. What happened, I think, is they went underground for their own protection, and then they never came out even though the threat was gone. And even though it would be very possible now, in this modern day and age, for them to come above ground more easily and not really suffer any repercussions, I think they got used to the idea of being underground. I think even if only one person joins the Church of Satan a day, they're still getting tens of thousands of dollars a year, and it's probably a much higher conversion rate than that, because it costs $200 to get the little red card saying you're in the Church of Satan. So essentially what it's devolved into is a board club of jaded wannabes and people who are ignorant enough to spend $200 for a card. That's not to say that there aren't people within the Church of Satan that do more than that. For instance, I would point out Boyd Rice. He does his own thing. He's very successful. But, for instance, Gilmore hasn't really done anything lately. The high priestess of the Church of Satan, Peggy Nadramia, who handles all of their public relations, is about the bitchiest person you'll ever meet. So it's no wonder that they're so sparklingly successful, so to speak, in a sarcastic manner. But that's not the only form of Satanism. There are also independent Satanists. I myself am an independent Satanist. I'm also an occultist. Now, independent Satanists would fall into two subcamps. Some of them practice the occult. Some of them are basically LaVeyan Satanists, only they haven't joined the Church of Satan and don't necessarily follow the tenets of that church. Independent Satanists are probably more common now than LaVeyan Satanists. Most Satanists, again, are solitary. They don't necessarily have any specific dogma or rules they adhere to. They may or may not perform rituals. They may or may not believe in demonic entities or supernatural forces. Most of them probably don't. Most of them are probably atheists like the LaVeyans are. In my own path, I follow an occult path. I perform rituals because I believe there's power in those rituals. Most independent Satanists would disagree with me on that. Most of them essentially are atheists like the LaVeyans are. But basically the independent Satanists are people who appreciate the philosophy of Satanism but aren't going to be duped into paying $200 to join a movement which really does nothing anymore. The Church of Satan itself hasn't really done anything significant since 2006. And you could say that that was a lone event, and going back, it didn't do anything significant since the late 1980s before that happened. So you've got very sporadic updates from the Church of Satan, and that's basically all it is. Anyone who thinks they're going to join some powerful worldwide network of, satanic occultists by paying $200 for the little red card is barking up the wrong tree. The third kind of Satanists are theistic. These people do believe in some supernatural or theistic force, which they may or may not term Satan. But here's something most people don't understand. Just because a person refers to themselves as a Satanist does not believe they believe in Satan. So making the argument, as many fundamentalist Christians do on my videos certainly, and on others as well, they say, well, if you believe in Satan, you must believe in God and Jesus, so, why are you following the loser? We do not believe in the Christian version of Satan. The more atheistic among us use Satan simply as a symbol of our rebellion against mainstream society, against right-wing Christian theocratic morality, against whatever we happen to oppose. The more theistic among the satanic movements may or may not use the term Satan. They may use the term Lucifer or the devil or Asmodeus or Beelzebub or whatever. They may use demonic forms, but many of them do not believe in them from a Christian perspective. To the average theistic Satanist, Satan is not the loser, the, tempter necessarily, not the cosmic idiot that the Bible makes him out to be, the fallen angel that will lose and go to hell and suffer for eternity. Many of them view Satan as the cosmic rebel, the enlightener of mankind, the bearer of truth and light, the bearer of true secular wisdom. And they may or may not believe in that in a theistic manner. Independent Satanists probably would not. Theistic Satanists probably would. They may link it to older, more pagan deistic forms. They may look at it from, for instance, the Setians were once mixed up interchangeably with Satanists. Despite the fact that Set and Satan are different terms for a similar deity and a theistic force, they were lumped together back, if you've ever seen the Geraldo Rivera Devil Worship documentary, you know that Michael Aquino of the Temple of Set was there with Xena, then Xena LaVey, now Xena Shrek, who was then representing the Church of Satan. And you've got these two forces mixed up, not because they're worshiping the same deity, not because they have the same beliefs. They're two drastically different forms. But as the Temple of Set explains, Set is the progenitorial stock from which the term Satan derives. And that is true. Satan is not a pure or even a Christian figure. It actually borrows heavily from Egyptian religion, from various forms of paganism, as does most of the Christian religion. It's borrowed from paganism. Christianity brought very little new to the religious field. It simply amalgamated various forms of paganism together. As to the charge of things such as child sacrifice or animal sacrifice or drinking blood, pointing out several things. The LaVeyan Satanists can't be child sacrificers or, these violent animal sacrificers that the Christians make them out to be. If you've ever read the Satanic Bible, and I'm sure most Christians have not, it strictly prohibits harming children, and it strictly prohibits harming animals unless they're for your food. So the LaVeyan Satanists can't really do that. Independent Satanists like myself, we may practice an occult path, but the specific occult variation which we're likely to follow would not include something like human sacrifice or animal sacrifice. Actually, if you look, Christians are the ones that symbolically drink blood and eat symbolically. They eat the flesh of Jesus. They're the ones whose ancestor religion, Judaism, sacrificed animals constantly. So you've got the Christians on one hand hypocritically saying that the Satanists are worshiping the devil and doing all these terrible things, when in reality the history of Christianity and Judaism is far more bloodstained and has loads of references to animal sacrifice. There's references to child sacrifice in the Bible. And you've got these things in there. So I suppose their idea is that it's okay if Jehovah commands it, but it's not okay if somebody else does it. Not to say that it's happening in the first place. Satanists don't do these things. I've never heard of a theistic Satanist sacrificing an animal or a child to their god. You've got all these fundamentalists back in the 80s and 90s claiming that this worldwide satanic organization existed to try to steal children away from their families, to breed children and sacrifice them to the devil, or that they abused animals and they mutilated cattle and so forth, when in reality there was never any evidence that any of these events had ever occurred. They'd found zero evidence in any satanic abuse case for there actually having been a satanic abuse, and most of the psychologists and psychiatrists which have studied the claimants in these cases have determined that they're actually basically just trying to get attention, or that abuse did happen and it was actually at the hands of, lo and behold, a fundamentalist Christian. For instance, watch the Geraldo Rivera Devil Worship documentary and pay close attention when they're talking about the satanic abuse cases. In one case, they claim that a pastor at a Christian church was performing devil worship rituals in the church involving children and molestation. So it was a Christian pastor in a Christian church, and yet they're claiming that he was worshiping the devil. In reality, what probably happened was he simply was diddling the little kiddies, and because they were so religiously indoctrinated, they started likening him to the devil. And this has been proven time and time again. Satanic abuse never happened in the past. It doesn't happen in the present. It's not going to happen in the future. Satanism simply doesn't jive with that kind of behavior. It's about moderation. It's about control of the self. It's about, rather than, and here's perhaps the most important point, Christianity and Judaism and Islam and all of these groups would say, you have to ban premarital sex, and you have to ban, your lust, and you have to stop doing any of these totally natural human behaviors like sex or using drugs, which has happened for the last 1,000,000 years. You have to stop doing all of these things. You can't even think about stealing or think about that woman that you like. It's a sin. You have to stop doing that. What Satanism would prescribe is not to try to banish these feelings, but to learn to control them in a positive way. That is, if you have lust for somebody, but you can't get them for whatever reason, you have to learn to control that lust in a healthy manner. If you can get them, and you really think that it's a positive thing in your life if you do get this person, then go ahead and try to get this person. If you think it's not going to bring negative repercussions, and you have to be mindful of the other person as well, because that's just common decency. The same goes with gluttony, sloth, all of these things. The Christians rail against sloth, and yet what do they do all weekend? Have a cookout, hang out in front of the TV and eat potato chips. It's the same thing. It's hypocrisy. Satanism is about defeating that self-hypocrisy and doing as thou will under